an affordable formula for treating this area parameter and other parameters. When dealing with the huge gap found between the thermal calculation and the real results, of course, we have to take into consideration the position of the position of the orientation, the combination of the different materials, the different layers, and also the thickness of the layers. This actually, we have tried also to find out the most used and the most applied traditional way to work out this solution and to reproduce them on
Any last quick question before we move to the second talk? Good, so thanks again.
It's just a little distracting on the radio.
Oh, I agree.
Thank you.
Right, so the second speaker is Mr. Tang Jidong. He's a PhD candidate at the National University of Singapore, and he's working on energy economics, low carbon transmission, and sustainability.
Hello everyone. My name is Kang Jidong, and currently a PhD candidate in National University of Singapore. And today, my topic is like cutting CO2 emissions through demand side regulation and include also linear program model. So I have listened to the presentation with your colleagues, and different from most of your presentation, not focusing on detailed processes such as building sector and like a specific power plant. And our study more likely to use more microeconomic model to address energy consumption problem. So the building sector is only one sector in my model. So let's say this is a content. Okay. Let's see the motivation of the study. We will focus on China, and currently the world's largest carbon dioxide emitter. So the reason for the high CO2 emissions in China could be the unreasonable industrial structure in China. Let's say the industrial sector in China contribute to 43% of the GDP, but contribute to 70% of the CO2 emissions in China. I believe this number is much higher than most of the developed countries and also developing countries. However, the service sector in China contributes to 48% of GDP, but it only contributes to 20% of CO2 emissions. So you can say the economy in China is mainly driven by emission-intensive industries. So the aim of this study is to identify some effective strategies to adjust this industrial structure to mitigate the CO2 emissions, and at the same time pose the minimum negative impact on GDP. So let's say if we want to reshape the industrial structure, there are two different ways. The first way is from the supply side, right? So if we want to limit some certain industries, we can directly shut down some backward production capacities, like some iron and cement companies, to reduce CO2 emissions. And this is already done in China. In the previous years, Chinese government has shut down a number of backward coal power plants. And the second way is to regulate from the demand side. What that mean by regulate from the demand side? That is that we can regulate some products from the demand side, some certain products. How to do it? We can impose some tax on some domestic products. We do not produce this domestically, we can just import it. So, or control the government's purchasing. So in this way, we can also reshape the domestic industrial structure. So this study focused on the demand side regulation. Okay, so compared to the supply side regulation, the demand side regulation actually cuts CO2 emissions in the entire supply chain of the products. So taking the construction products as an example. So this is the construction products for final consumption. So if we directly cut this domestic product, so it will, if it is reduced, the related industries, the production in the related industry will reduce at the same time, such as like iron and cement and the transportation. So in this way, we can reduce the CO2 emissions in the entire supply chain of this product. So taking the like automobile as an example, if we like reduce the domestic production of automobile, the entire supply chain of this products will reduce. So we can say demand side regulation cuts CO2 emissions as a source. Okay, so clearly, if we cut the domestic products, the economic growth will also be impacted because we produce less. So this study focused on two specific questions. The first one is, what are the impacts of the demand side regulation on CO2 emissions and GDP? And the second one is the most important one is we want to identify the key products that should be firstly regulated in order to reduce CO2 emissions at the minimum decrease in GDP. So that means even though we cutting final demand, domestic final demand will impact GDP, but we can at least find some key products that should be firstly regulated to reduce CO2 emissions at the minimum sacrifice of economic growth. Okay, so it must be admitted that in addition to industrial structure adjustments, some other ways can also reduce CO2 emissions, such as technological advancement and energy efficiency improvement and clean energy penetration, as mentioned in the previous colleagues. But these measures are not considered in this study. So because we only focus on industrial structure, the most effective way, so we consider these factors are constant. So these are the previous gaps, the gaps in previous studies. Some studies also use the similar tools like input-output model to identify some effective way to adjust the industrial structure, but they mostly focus on supply side regulation, but rarely the demand side. And secondly, they didn't identify the optimal regulation sequence of this regulation, such as like which key products should be firstly regulated. And thirdly, they normally use a single region model rather than a multi-region model. So in this case, they ignore the interrelationship among different regions. So this study, the technique we use is an input-output model, and this is a very widely used energy economics model in my own field. Because as I mentioned just now, if we cut a specific product, the entire supply chain of this product will be impacted. So how do we link different industrial together? We use this formulation. So this formulation is based on a published IO table, input-output table. Like in each country, like every 5 years, the country will publish the IO table. This table builds the interrelationship between different sectors like building and automobile and iron and cement. So based on this table, we assume that the relationship between these industries will be quite constant. So we build this multi-regional input-output model to capture the linkages between different sectors. So this part is the intermediate demand, this is the final demand, and the sum of this demand will equal to the total output. So the idea of this model is to combine that input-output table with a linear programming model and set the final demand as a decision variable, and the objective is to maximize the total GDP in this country, and at the same time minimize the total CO2 emissions in this country. And the other factors such as energy efficiency and clean energy shares are considered as constant. So we only cut this final demand. This factor is the final demand factor. It contains the final demand of like automobile and like plastics or construction. So if we cut this domestic final demand, what's the impact on GDP and CO2 emissions? So in this way, we hope to find the these are some constraints and objectives of this model. So in this way, we can find the optimal final demand regulation strategies to cut CO2 emissions. So as a step further, we hope to further identify an optimal regulation sequence. What does this sequence mean? That means we hope to find the key product that if we cut this product, the CO2 emissions will decline at the minimum decrease in GDP. So in this paper, we found that there is a certain sequence of this cutting product. If we're following this sequence, we can always make sure that the CO2 emissions will decline at the minimum decrease in GDP. So this is the proof that this sequence exists. Okay, let's say some illustrated results. So our motivation, our target is to cut final demand to reshape the industrial structure to reduce CO2 emissions. So we found that if we cut the final demand, there is a parallel frontier between GDP and the CO2 emissions. So obviously, if we cut final demand, we can say the GDP will decrease. Yes, because we cut the domestic final demand, like we choose to import. So the GDP will decrease, but the CO2 emissions will decrease as well. I say. So you can follow this trend, and we found that at the first beginning, if we cut the final demand, the GDP will the CO2 emissions will decrease very quickly, and the GDP will decrease very slow. But we will continue to cut the CO2 emissions by regulating final demand, the impact on GDP will become larger and larger. And this result is our second step to identify the optimal regulation sequence. Let's say the main results are illustrated here. So we identify the 32 key products in China that should be firstly cut. And then in this way, the CO2 emissions will reduce significantly at the minimum decrease in GDP. You can say these products are located in different regions in China, different regions. Like this is Beijing and Tianjin. Beijing. These are the South Coast region, North Coast region, Central Coast region. We found that if we cut the metallurgy product and the final product, the non-metal products, the metal products, the coal mining products in this Xinjiang region, it is the most economic way to reduce CO2 emissions. So this is the way to find the key products that should be regulated. So from this table, we can find that as I mentioned, there's another way to regulate from the demand side. So the advantage to regulate the final demand to shape the industrial structure from the demand side is that how to illustrate this? Because you can say these two regions are very developed regions in China, but actually in these two regions, the CO2 emissions in these two regions are actually relatively low. However, why should we cut the final demand in these two regions? Because these two regions consume the product in which are very carbon intensive. How to say that? That means a great amount of CO2 emissions are embodied in this product consumed by this region. So even though these products are not produced in this region, but we cut down the products in these two regions, the CO2 emissions in the other regions will be reduced. So okay, that's the way. So this is the, you can say, the impact on different sectors by having the key products. And these are the impact of the different regions by having the key product. So in conclusion, this study combine an IO model and a linear programming model to explore demand side strategy for CO2 emissions reduction. And the multi-region IO model helps to identify the interrelationship between different regions. And we found some certain products should be firstly regulated. And the results also show that the regulation of the final demand in one region will also impact the CO2 emissions in other regions, which supply goods and services to this region. Okay, this is the presentation. Thank you. Questions?
So can you explain a little bit what you mean by with your GDP? So what's going into that? Let's say making a sector more efficient, are you accounting for the cost and you need to make that sector efficient, or are you just talking about cutting demand?
Actually, I'm just talking about cutting demand. And in this model, we assume that the efficiency will remain the same. Yes. So we are talking about like the structure adjustment.
And how do you cut demand? Do you start importing from other places, or we just ask people to reduce consumption?
Actually, I think mostly it's to import from other countries and cut the domestic final demand.
Okay. So what you're assuming is that the pollution will be happening somewhere else, but it will still be happening.
Yes, yes. So that means some certain products, it will be a great amount of embodied in this product.
Yeah. In your result, you said you have to cut 3 materials or 3 products to reduce CO2 emission in different regions in your country. Why do you not go through exploiting renewable energy resources to reduce this and you keep your products? So the last part of your research, you were talking about cutting 3 different products in different regions. You get me? So and you said it's the best way to reduce CO2 emission. So in my opinion, go through exploiting renewable energy like geothermal energy or solar energy and keep the products if you need them in your market. So what's the point from cutting products which people need? Especially if you are making good money for this business.
Yes, very good question. Yeah, but as I mentioned, there are alternative ways to reduce CO2 emission. Not just we need to cut the final demand.
Yeah,
this is maybe the last choice. But the industrial structural adjustment is an effective way to cut CO2 emissions. I think it should be an alternative way, except for the energy efficiency and the clean energy penetration. But it is a way, yes.
But I think there is like a strong competition between oil companies and renewable energy companies, and the policy of the government wants, for example, to keep this side more powerful than the other side. This is the debate, because in some countries, even the government, because they're making enough money from oil and gas, and stuff like that. They don't want to go to renewable energy. So the best way, in my opinion, go to renewable energy, stop exporting gas and oil to, this is the best way. So yeah, because right now some multinational companies like Amavaku, for example, Chinese companies, they start already investing in Africa, in a few countries like Chad and stuff like that. They are making good money there. So if they go for the first way, which is exporting renewable energy, they're going to lose a lot of money in Africa. The best way for them, they start cutting some products and keep oil and gas. So in my opinion, getting through renewable energy is the best way.
Yes, it is correct. But as I mentioned, given the unreasonable current industry structure in China, reshaping the industry structure is also a reasonable way to reduce emissions. Yes.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks again. Right, so next we have Professor Iko Tanabe. So I apologize for any pronunciation mistake. He's a faculty of mechanical engineering at Nagaoka University of Technology in Japan.
Thank you, Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. My name is Iko Tanabe. I'm from Japan, Nagaoka University of Technology. My theme is here. Post-cooling technology of Washington using mist of strong alkaline water for saving energy and environmental safe gas. So, in manufacturing field, saving oil and saving energy is very important for environment friendly. However, machine tool need large quantity of lubricant oil, cooling oil, and large energy for smoothing driving. Therefore, a new post-cooling and machine cooling method using strong alkaline water mist was investigated and evaluated for environmentally friendly. This is so mist device and measuring system of heat transfer coefficient. So, mist device is very simple. This is a simple nozzle. Supply here and supply strong alkaline water mixed here and splashed on it. And the measuring system is ceramics heater, very small, and sandwich using steel plates. The red is thermal coupler. This is there are three kinds of nozzle: two maker and our original. Our original is very simple. Several water rate, flow rate, and air flow rate. And angle is very angle of injection is very important for the high cooling. This is the relationship between the heat transfer coefficient and the mixed condition with water and strong alkaline water and air. So here is only air. This one is theoretical value. And here is strong alkaline water only. There is theoretical value. That is very low. And so result is maker B, maker A, and our origin. Here is like mist condition. And here is strong alkaline water with air. Little different. So in this case, heat transfer coefficient very high because of evaluation, water evaluation, therefore very high. And solid line is experimental value, and dotted line is calculation value. So calculation value is suitable to experimental value. So calculation model is here, my original. So this is calculation model. So very slow. So this calculation model can use for the design of nozzle and control factor. Control the cooling factor. So this is my original nozzle. Optimum condition. Very long. Very long means that angle of injection is very small. And inner diameter is very small. Because this cooling part is concentration using this nozzle and this small diameter. Alkali water's 2 liter per minute is maximum value. Here is also. This is optimum nozzle specification. If this is maximum value, if you use more high capacity, cooling current is more big. This is device limit. And long nozzle with small diameter. At that time, heat transfer coefficient is 30,000 watt per square meter Kelvin. Very high cooling. So, conventional cooling with oil is this value. 20 times. Very good. This is evaluation using turning. This material is titanium alloy. This is cutting difficult material. And so, measure temperature and our cooling system. This is two temperature, dry, wet, and strong alkaline water using nozzle, Mega B, Mega A, and our original. So our original nozzle is very small temperature. That is 1/3 of dry cutting. Very cool. This is two life. Dry, wet, our cooling. Life is very good. Life becomes very long because the tool is cool temperature, low temperature. And surface roughness is here, dry, wet, our system. Left is start of cutting. Right is tool life limit. Our system is very nice, smooth surface. This is the surface profile. Very smooth. This is dry and wet. So, finally, very easy LCA. This is calculation model. Upper is electrical power. Lower is oil. So this is Japanese company from Japanese company. And upper is conventional wet cutting using oil. So machine and waste oil disposal. disposable. One day is 8 hours working. 1 year is 250 days working. So this is exhaust CO2 per 1 year. And this is lower is our strong alkaline water mist machine and mist generation and make strong alkaline water. As I said, this is the exhaust CO2 per 1 year. You can see here. So exhaust CO2 per 1 year. One machine, conventional wet cutting and our system. You can see maybe 1/3. So maybe 60% down. So Paris promise said we should under 25%. However, our system is under 60%. Very nice condition for environmental friendly. So, final consideration, 2 results. One is the heat transfer coefficient. Possible cooling is very quick, 20 times. And the CO2, exhaust CO2 is from 37%, 6% over done. Very quick. Everyone like each result. However, strong alkaline water mist can perform both at once. Very nice condition. This is the conclusion. Stronger alkaline water can perform or can save oil and energy in for environmentally friendly in manufacturing field, like here. Thank you for your attention.
I have some time for questions. I'm okay with awkward silence. Thank you for your presentation. This method so with performance, I want to know how to dispose of this alkaline water at the quick. How to dispose it. If you need a collection of the water, so where does the water go?
Oh, this is so device is nearly 100 sorry, 1 million yen. And this machine makes 20 liters per hour.
But once once the water hits the machine, where do you collect the water? You collect it and reuse it?
Only this is like the same.
I have like 3 different questions. So the first question, in table number 4. Yeah, you said the machine works just 250 days per year. Yeah, number 4 basically positive. So number 4. I have seen it so just 250 years, 250 days per year. How about the rest? You remember? You remember? So in this case, so the efficiency of the machine is like like 70% or 80%, not able to get to the top. You can't use it all the year. You just use it for 8 months, 9 months, something like that. No more than that. Just second line. I will say it 8 hours cultivated by 250. But in some regions or some type of industries, we need the machine for 24 hours, especially in these regions.
This is only one example.
Yeah.
In this case, is Japanese standard working condition.
All right.
That's no problem. Maybe this one 20 hours all day working, and this number become 365 percentage is same. Same.
And the second question, there is another technology, which is a Japanese technology. If you know absorption machines, it is doing the same thing, only it's 0% CO2 emission, which is based on bromidation, bromidation water. So in this case, if you are looking for a positive temperature between 0 to 8 degrees, you go to this machine. If you are looking for minus, so I mean from 0 to minus 50, in this case, you go to NH3, H2, H2. So if you need a comparison between two different industries, both of them are Japanese. So,
General function.
yeah.
This like water.
All right.
Because corrosion.
All right.
But strong alkaline water with 12.5% pH up,
Right.
no corrosion. Most material are not corrosion. However, two materials, aluminum and copper, are corrosion. That's the problem. Therefore, two materials cannot use.
And the third question is, we were talking about compressors. So you have a compressor and you have water here. Your compressor, you didn't mention the type of your compressor. Is it a thermal compressor or a mechanical compressor? If it's a mechanical compressor, you need to know just the type of the compressor. So,
Mechanical compressor.
yeah, compressor. Yeah. Is it a thermal compressor or just a mechanical compressor? A mechanical compressor. Oh. Okay.
I have also a question. So you showed the optimal ratio of water to air. And you found one and you said that's the best for your application. Is this ratio optimal for other applications or no, it's dependent really on the type?
Yeah, maybe that calculation will be easy. That parameter is a normal parameter, water temperature. However, I don't use that because the influence is very small and saving energy. Therefore, I didn't use the water temperature, no cooling. Therefore, I select for the suitable optimum condition. Diameter and long nozzle and mixed ratio. That's one. Because very sure. Therefore, I believe it is calculation.
How about the cost of the system like this? Maybe you need to calculate.
Yes.
How does it compare to the traditional oil-based?
Yes. Maybe near this cost.
No, but the economic.
Yes, because waste oil is very, very large cost. Energy is the same. Therefore, in this figure, 6% that is only exhaust CO2 and cost same.
You have no further questions? We move to the next video. Thanks again. Right, so the last presenter is Dr. Alexander Ustimenko. He's the CEO of Plasma Thermics R&D, and he's also a leading staff scientist and head of division of the Research Institute of Experimental and Theoretical Physics at Kazakh National University. So,
Thank you very much. And good afternoon, everybody. In this presentation, I will present our experience in plasma fuel systems for energy efficiency, cooling, and thermal power plants. Just to begin, you can see in this figure that generation of electricity in the world in 1973 and there is not change very much. So for production of electricity, we used more than 30 years ago, 38% of coal, and now we use 39% of coal. So that is a huge resource, huge of quantity of coal used to generate electricity. That's why there is such a problem. It is not the use of coal, but how the coal is used. That must be the focus. So, more about traditional wake up or start up of rust coal furnaces, rust coal boilers. Here you can see conventional fuel start up there, rust coal boilers. Through this burners or fuel nozzles, they produce a lot of fuel oil and warm up the volume inside of the boiler. And they warm up, the period of warm up can be several hours, and a huge amount of fuel oil or natural gas we have to use to warm up the fuels. So here you can see the figure with fuel oil array for one startup of the furnace, independence on steam activity of the boiler in turning around. So you can see how huge quantity of fuel oil we have to use just to warm up boilers, coolers for the boilers, not just fuel oil boilers. And what we suggested to solve this problem. Here you can see direct flow plasma fuel systems. Really, that is a direct flow burner, pulverized flow burner, but equipped with plasma. And this technology is based on plasma thermochemical preparation of coal for burning, and it allows substituting of gas or fuel oil by coal itself and use it for startup of the boiler. Here you can see this is the flame into the furnace. That is a plasma torch. They are called mixture switch, blowing in this way. And here we have high temperature plasma flame, which mixed with air fuel mixture, and inside of this oil we have thermochemical preparation of coal. So in the furnace we can use high temperature to component fuel system. of course, high temperature Jakarta. So here you can see experimental installation. It is an experimental plasma curing system, direct flow plasma curing systems, which was produced in our laboratory. And the length of this tube is about meters. It is a plasma torch with 200 kilowatt power. The furnace called butter. And here you can see how it works. Plasma torch power was 100 kilowatt. All consumption through this tube, through this furnace fuel system was 1 ton per hour. And the measured temperature of this flame already 1,120 degrees centigrade. And here also it is written measured composition of gas at the exit of this plasma fuel system. So you can see here a lot of hydrogen, CO, and this flame can be ignited and burn steadily even in open air. But with the furnace, it can work even better. So plasma torch is the main element of plasma fuel system. What is a plasma torch? It is a cathode, anode, so electrode that is a DC, the current plasma torch. Between cathode and anode, we start an arc, and with this gap we blow air. And in the exit of this nozzle of anode, we can produce high temperature plasma flame. Here you can see a plasma torch in action. So the temperature of this flame in the exit of the plasma flame is about 5 to 6,000 degrees. That is just to show you the dimensions of this plasma torch. It is 200 kilowatt power. The weight of this plasma torch is about 25 kilogram. Length is about half a meter, and the diameter about 25 centimeters. So it's a rather small device and rather simple. There are different plasma fuel systems. It depends on the burners which are used in thermal power plants. For example, there are two main types of such burners. That is vortex burner and the vortex plasma fuel system. So the air, secondary air, and primary air with air mixture goes in swirling inside of these burners. And as you saw already, direct flow plasma fuel system, which we use for direct flow burners, furnace flow burners. The principle for working of plasma systems the same in most of them. Air core mixture goes to the high temperature plasma plate. Inside of this chamber, we can produce high temperature fuel component fuel, which can be ignited inside of the furnace very stably and work instead of fuel or natural gas. And on the right figure, you can see just calculations, what we can produce, and why this fuel can ignite it inside of the furnace. That is a thermodynamic calculation of So in temperature about 1,600 degrees, we can see that in gaseous phase we mainly have nitrogen, of course, because CO and H2, the main area. So there is a synthesis gas, that's why this fuel can be ignited and be burned very soon. So there are some examples how we can use plasma fuel systems just to produce the top of coolers for boilers. Here you can see we change traditional burners by plasma fuel systems, and they start to work like fuel oil nozzles inside of the furnaces, and can produce startup. That is another layout for plasma fuel systems, just for boiler 640 ton per hour of steam productivity. It was done in GCESDDay plant in Russia. For plasma fuel systems were equipped instead of traditional gas burners. And one more layout of plasma fuel systems at a boiler of 420 ton per hour steam productivity, that is in Almaty, Kazakhstan thermal power plant 2. Instead of 3 burners, we used 3 plasma fuel systems, and 3 burners were traditional burners. And using this scheme, we could start up the plasma, using these plasma fuel systems, we could start up. Here you can see just a scheme of this boiler, and these two and these furnaces were equipped with plasma fuel systems. And during startup, we could see through the looking window. In the very beginning, we could see this flame from the furnace or from the plasma fuel systems, and the temperature of this flame was 835 degrees centigrade, and in 5 minutes already the core flame temperature was 1020 degrees, and startup degrees. Some explanation of what we have, that is calculations. Temperature field is the plane of central burner. Here you can see traditional or conventional incineration of coal, and in this furnace we had some problems. For example, you can see that the wall has a very high temperature here. That is not very good. And also they here had a rather high temperature. But when we use plasma fuel systems, you can see that the temperature in this area is less. That is good, and also the temperature in the outlet of the furnace also is very good. So you can see here the difference: conventional incineration and traditional incineration, and plasma assisted incineration. And some parameters at the exit of the boiler furnace during plasma fuel systems use. Here you can see the column with traditional combustion. Temperature at the exit of the furnace, concentration of oxygen, CO2 concentration, NOx, and then carbon. And when we use 3 plasma fuel systems, instead of gas burners, we have all parameters a little better than combustion. And that is experimental figures. Plasma A, we got it in our laboratory when did some experiments with plasma-aided flow combustion. And you can see that nitrogen oxides can be reduced when we use plasma systems. And they can be reduced up to 2 times. And what is not usually, at the same time, we can reduce unburned carbon at the same time. So unburned carbon was reduced 4 times when we use plasma torch or system of combustion. And approximately the same figures in this slide. Conventional technology and plasma technology. That is fuel oil rate for Russian thermal power plants. You can see that is 5.1 million tons per year they use for startup of boilers and stabilization of the flame. Also, for Kazakhstan, this figure is rather small, but in any case, it's almost 1 million tons per year. It's very huge. Investment for thermal power plants for conventional technology, if we take the 100%, for plasma technology, it will take approximately 5%. 5% of it. The same with operating costs, only third part of operating costs for conventional technology, volume of fuel oil, so we need for plasma technology. And electric power consumption for plasma torches much more less than for conventional technology. Volume fuel oil just for using thermal power. But the main figures are here. You can see that 1 ton of fuel oil equivalent by caloricity approximately is 2 tons of coal. But 1 ton of fuel equivalent by price is up to 20 tons of coal. So the difference in price can be 10 times. And also 2 very good things which from environmental point of view. That is 2 times reduction of nitrogen oxides and 4 times reduction for carbon. And we try out all types of coal in different thermal power plants on Russia, Kazakhstan, Ukraine, some thermal power plants China. Here you can see coal type which we tested. That is shale, lignite, brown, bituminous, anthracite, mixture of these coals, and their thermochemical characteristics. So all types of coal which we usually have work we tested. And they worked quite well. Also, what is interesting, that is ash content, that is unusual. We could thermochemically prepared shale up to 8% of ash content. So it's very hard to cool. And some conclusions. Here, I think there is no need to read. Thank you very much.
Thanks for the talk. You showed that your plasma technology reduced the amount of nitrogen oxide. How does it do
it? Okay. As you know, nitrogen oxides can, there are two different nitrogen oxides which we produce in bodies. First of all, it is thermal nitrogen oxides. So with thermal nitrogen oxides, we can do nothing. Because they forms using air which we have in the furnace. But the main part of nitrogen oxides which we produce in thermal in the boilers, in the furnaces, that is a few nitrogen oxides. All fuels and coals, of course, they have nitrogen inside of coal. Fuel nitrogen oxides, that is exactly oxides which produce from that fuel, that nitrogen which consists of coal or volatilized from coal during its warming. So, traditionally, when the process goes in the furnace, nitrogen goes from coal together with all volatiles during warming of this coal, and around this coal a lot of air inside of the furnace. That's why practically all nitrogen which consists in coal, which volatilized from coal, it can be used for forming of pure nitrogen oxides inside of it. But when we do thermochemical preparation of coal inside